July 24th, 1943, 11:47 p.m. Stad radar station, 25 miles west of Hamburg. Oberleutnant Klaus Hoffmann's coffee has gone cold. He doesn't notice. His eyes are locked on the Würzburg radar scope before him, watching the familiar green sweep painted circular path across the cathode screen. For 18 months, he's guided Messerschmitt night fighters to their targets with precision that earned him a mention in dispatches. Tonight, the scope shows what he expects. A massive formation of RAF bombers approaching from the northwest, their returns glowing like a constellation of deadly stars. Bearing 270, range 80 kilometers, he calls into his headset, vectoring Hauptmann Werner Streib's Bf-110 toward the incoming stream. Altitude approximately 5,000 meters, multiple contacts. Streib acknowledges, his voice crackling with static and anticipation. The ace has 17 confirmed kills. Tonight should add to that tally.
But then, Hoffmann sees something that makes his hand freeze over the plotting table. The scope erupts. What began as distinct points of light suddenly multiplies. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of returns blooming across the screen like a blizzard materializing from nowhere. The sweep passes again. The snowstorm intensifies. Hoffmann blinks hard, wondering if his exhausted eyes are betraying him. He taps the scope's housing. Nothing changes. The screen has become a brilliant chaos of white noise, every bomber seemingly splitting into 100 ghosts. Static control, this is Knockjagger 2-4. Streib's voice cuts through, tension replacing confidence. I have visual on multiple falling objects. They're reflecting moonlight, thousands of them. What am I looking at? Hoffmann can't answer. He's staring at his scope, watching 2 years of German radar superiority dissolve into electronic snow.
His commanding officer, Major Ernst Dietrich, moves from station to station, barking orders, demanding reports. Every operator tells the same story. Every Freya, every Würzburg, every Liechtenstein set along the coast, all showing the same impossible display. At Luftwaffe Fighter Command in Berlin, telephones are already ringing off their cradles. From the Ruhr to Hamburg, from the coast to the interior, German night defense networks are going blind. Controllers who've become accustomed to reading bomber streams like sheet music now face indecipherable noise. The carefully coordinated Himmelbett system, the flak bed that's claimed hundreds of Allied bombers, is suddenly fighting shadows. In the sky above, Flight Lieutenant David Shannon of RAF 106 Squadron feels the Lancaster bomber beneath him shudder as the rear gunner releases the first bundle of window. Thin strips of aluminum-coated paper, each cut precisely to half the wavelength of German radar frequencies, cascade into the bomber stream's wake. Shannon doesn't fully understand the science. He knows only what the briefing officer told them at Syerston Airfield 6 hours ago. These strips will save lives. Window away, the wireless operator confirms, his voice steady despite the flak beginning to probe the darkness around them. Behind them, 746 more bombers are doing the same thing, each aircraft releasing bundle after bundle at 1-minute intervals. 12 million strips of metallized paper are falling through the night sky, each one a tiny radar reflector, each one creating a return indistinguishable from an actual bomber. The Allied scientists who spent 2 years perfecting this countermeasure calculated every dimension, tested every material, delayed its use for fear the Germans would copy it. Tonight, Operation Gamora's opening act is proving their work brilliant. Hauptmann Werner Streib banks his Messerschmitt Bf-110 hard to starboard, scanning the darkness for the bomber his controller promised was there. His radar operator, Unteroffizier Paul Gildner, hunches over the Liechtenstein BC airborne intercept radar mounted in the nose
its distinctive antler-like antenna array cutting through the night air. Nothing, Herr Hauptmann. Gildner's voice carries frustration. The scope it's useless. I'm seeing returns everywhere and nowhere. Strybe knows what his operator means. Through the canopy, he can see them now. Thousands of tiny metallic strips tumbling through the moonlit sky, catching the light like a swarm of fireflies. Some still flutter on tiny parachutes. Most simply fall, creating a shimmering curtain between him and his prey. His 17 kills came from precision. Radar guidance to visual range, identification, a calculated burst from his nose-mounted cannons. Tonight, precision is impossible.
Below, Hamburg is beginning to burn. Without effective fighter direction, the British bombers are reaching their targets virtually unopposed. The first Pathfinder aircraft, Mosquitoes, carrying target indicators, are dropping their pyrotechnic markers over the Billwerder district. Red and green flares ignite, turning the Elbe River into a ribbon of reflected fire. Heavy bombers follow, their loads a carefully calculated mixture: high explosives to blow off roofs and shatter windows, incendiaries to ignite what's left. At the Stade radar station, Oberleutnant Hoffmann has stopped trying to make sense of his scope. Major Dietrich paces behind him, telephone pressed to his ear, listening to a furious General Major Josef Kamhuber demand answers. Kamhuber built the Kamhuber Line, the integrated network of searchlights, flak, and radar-directed night fighters stretching from Denmark to France. It's been the shield protecting the Reich from RAF bomber streams.
Tonight, that shield is tissue paper. Tell the Herr General Major, Dietrich says, his voice hollow, that we cannot vector fighters to contacts we cannot identify. We are operating blind. Hoffmann knows what this means. Without radar, German night fighting has regressed to 1940. Visual searches in an infinite dark sky. Pilots burning fuel hunting ghosts, while real bombers slip through to their targets. Some crews will get lucky, most won't. Flight Lieutenant Shannon feels the Lancaster buck as flak bursts pepper the air around them. Without radar direction, German anti-aircraft batteries are firing barrage patterns, filling probable bomber paths with steel and hoping for hits. It's terrifying but inefficient. Shannon's bomb aimer, Flying Officer Leonard Sumter, lies prone in the nose, eyes locked on the Pathfinder markers blooming below. Bomb doors open, Shannon orders. The Lancaster's belly yawns wide, wind screaming through the opening. Left, left.
Steady, Sumter guides, his thumb hovering over the release. Bombs gone. 4,000 pounds of high explosive drops away. Shannon doesn't wait to observe results. He's already banking, diving, changing altitude, dumping more window bundles. Behind him, the rear gunner reports fighter flares. German pilots are firing colored markers at suspected bomber positions, hoping to create visual reference points their comrades can converge on. It's desperate, improvised, and mostly futile. By 1:30 a.m., the first wave has passed. Hamburg is a sea of flame visible from 100 miles away. Hoffmann's radar scope has begun to clear as the metallic strips fall below effective altitude, but the damage is done. Preliminary reports trickling into Fighter Command paint a catastrophic picture. Perhaps 10 to 15 bombers lost, a tiny fraction of the attacking force. On a normal night, the Kamhuber Line might claim 40, 50, even 60 aircraft.
Strybe lands at Lüneburg Airfield just before dawn, his ammunition belt still full. The ace who terrorized RAF bomber crews has spent 4 hours chasing phantoms. In the debriefing room, he faces a Luftwaffe intelligence officer who can barely meet his eyes. They knew, Strybe says quietly, accepting a cigarette. They knew exactly what frequencies we use, exactly how to blind us. This wasn't luck. This was science. The intelligence officer nods. Samples of the mysterious strips are already being analyzed. Initial reports confirm Strybe's suspicion. Each piece is precisely cut to resonate with German radar wavelengths. Someone in Britain has solved a very complex problem, and the solution is devastatingly simple: aluminum foil and paper.
July 25th, 1943, 8:15 a.m. Rechlin Luftwaffe Test Center, 90 miles north of Berlin. Dr. Hans Plendl hasn't slept. The Luftwaffe's chief radar scientist stands before a table covered in metallic strips, each one carefully measured, weighed, and analyzed. His team worked through the night, examining samples rushed from Hamburg by motorcycle courier. The laboratory's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his exhausted face as he addresses a room full of officers who expect answers he doesn't want to give. "Gentlemen," Plendl begins, holding up a single strip. "This is aluminum foil bonded to paper. It measures exactly 27 centimeters in length, precisely half the wavelength of our Würzburg radar, operating at 53 centimeters." He pauses, letting the implication sink in. The British didn't guess. They know our exact frequencies. General Major Wolfgang Martini, head of Luftwaffe Signals, leans forward. "Can we change frequencies?" "Not quickly. Our entire network, every Freya, every Würzburg, every Liechtenstein set, and every night fighter operates on established bands. Retooling would take months, perhaps a year, and..." Plendl hesitates, then continues. "They've clearly prepared multiple variants. Look," he spreads different samples across the table. "Some are slightly longer, others shorter. They are ready for whatever frequency we choose." The room falls silent. Germany's technological edge in night fighting, built through years of research, millions of Reichsmarks, the finest engineering minds, has been neutralized by paper and foil that probably costs pennies per ton. Across the English Channel, at RAF Bomber Command Headquarters in High Wycombe, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris is reading preliminary loss reports with something approaching satisfaction. Operation Gamora's opening night, 791 bombers dispatched, 12 lost, a 1.5% loss rate. Without window, he'd have expected losses of 5 to 6%, perhaps 40 to 50 aircraft.
Each bomber saved represents 7 lives preserved, hundreds of hours of training retained, millions of pounds of equipment still operational. The Boffins were right, Harris mutters to his deputy, Air Vice Marshal Robert Sondby. The Boffins, British scientists who'd been testing Windows since 1942, had promised this result. Harris had delayed using it, fearing German retaliation against British cities. Now, with Germany's own bomber force diminished and the strategic initiative firmly allied, he'd approved its deployment. But Harris knows this victory is temporary. The Germans are brilliant engineers, resourceful and determined. They'll adapt. At Luftwaffe Fighter Command, they're already trying. By mid-morning on July 25th, new tactical orders are being distributed to night fighter units across occupied Europe. Without reliable radar, German defenders must rely on older methods.
Visual searches aided by searchlight batteries, fighter flares marking bomber streams, close cooperation between ground observers and aircraft. Some commanders propose abandoning the rigid Himmelbett system entirely, allowing fighters to freelance through bomber streams. Hauptmann Streib receives these orders at his pilot's briefing. The instructions sound primitive, almost medieval, like archers searching for targets in the dark. His younger pilots, trained entirely on radar-directed interception, look confused. How do you hunt what you cannot see? You learn, Streib tells them, the way our predecessors did in 1940. You watch for exhaust flames. You position yourself below the bomber stream where their silhouettes show against the stars. You follow tracer fire from other night fighters. You get lucky or you get killed. That night, July 25th into 26th, RAF Bomber Command returns to Hamburg. 739 aircraft drop another 2,300 tons of bombs and millions more window strips.
German defenses claim 17 bombers. Under normal circumstances, they might have claimed 50. The city below is transforming into hell. Fires from the first raid never fully extinguished. Tonight's incendiaries find a landscape already primed.
broken buildings, exposed timber, ruptured gas mains. At 1:20 a.m., something unprecedented begins. Multiple fires merge into a single massive conflagration. Superheated air rises violently, drawing fresh oxygen from all directions. Winds reaching 150 miles per hour roar through streets, feeding flames that reach 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The Hamburg firestorm has begun. Dr. Plendl, still at Rechlin, receives fragmented reports. His scientific mind processes the tactical defeat through equations and frequencies. But he's also a German watching his nation's third largest city burn, while his radars show only static. Later, he'll write in his journal,
July 24th, 1943, the night we learned that victory belongs not to the most sophisticated technology, but to the side that renders the enemy's sophistication irrelevant. By dawn on July 26th, Hamburg's casualty reports are staggering. The firestorm killed an estimated 40,000 civilians in a single night. Over the next week, 2 more major raids will follow, each using window, each facing minimal resistance. The psychological impact on German home defense is immeasurable.
July 26, 1943, 6:40 p.m. Luftwaffe Fighter Command, Berlin, Tempelhof. In a smoky conference room that smells of sweat and wet wool, General Major Josef Kammhuber stands over a wall map of northern Germany. Red grease pencil lines mark RAF approach corridors. Blue pins mark night fighter fields. Black circles mark radar stations, now admitting, in clipped voices, that they cannot separate bombers from the shimmering blizzard of aluminum strips. Major Hayo Hermann waits at the edge of the room, flight jacket still on, cap tucked under one arm. He's not a radar man. He's a flyer, an old-school bomber pilot turned tactician, and he listens as senior officers argue in frustrated loops about wavelengths and filters, about whether operators can read through the noise if they turn down gain or change pulse repetition. Hermann clears his throat. Kammhuber looks up, irritated.
Herr General, Hermann says, careful with rank and tone, we cannot fight a war on instruments if the enemy has learned to make the instruments lie. A few officers bristle. Plendl's technicians aren't here, but their pride is, embodied in every expensive radar mast now rendered uncertain. Hermann points toward the map, toward Hamburg's marked area, still circled in black soot on paper, as if the city's smoke has stained the staff room. Use what the British cannot counterfeit: light, fire, the glow of their own raid. Put single-seat fighters over the target area, not tethered to a radar box. Let them hunt visually, above the flak, where silhouettes show against the flames. Someone mutters the phrase that will soon spread through the Luftwaffe like a dare: wilde Sau, wild boar, hunting by instinct, not by instruments. Kammhuber's jaw tightens. He built his system like a machine, every part synchronized. Now a major is offering him a knife fight in the dark.
And the flak? Kammhuber asks. My batteries will shoot down our own fighters. Hermann meets his stare. Then we coordinate. We set ceiling limits. We use colored recognition flares. But if we do nothing, they will burn another city while our night fighters chase ghosts. Outside, Berlin's air raid sirens remain silent, for now. In Hamburg, they have never really stopped. July 27, 1943, 11:12 p.m., Altenau Airfield, south of Berlin. Lieutenant Rolf Stein pulls himself into the cockpit of his Bf-109G, the fighter's narrow canopy already fogging at the edges. He's a day fighter pilot trained to dogfight under the sun. Tonight, he's been ordered to fly at midnight, guided not by ground control, but by the orange bloom on the horizon. A mechanic leans in close, shouting over the engine warm-up. Remember, Herr Lieutenant, do not dive through the flak belts, stay above them, and watch for collisions. Everyone will be up there. Stein nods, throat dry.
He understands the unspoken truth. The Luftwaffe is improvising because it has to. Somewhere along the Channel coast, British crews are feeding bundles of metallic strips into open chutes, and German radar scopes are turning to snow. Start. The ground crew yanks the prop through. The Daimler-Benz engine catches. The aircraft vibrates like an angry animal. Stein taxis into darkness, following a line of hooded lights that vanish as soon as his wheels lift off. Blackout discipline, even now, even with Hamburg on fire. Climbing through 3,000 meters, he sees it. A distant, pulsing orange bruise where the city should be. Above it, the sky flashes white as flak bursts, then goes dark again, then flashes, like a storm trapped inside its own cloud. His radio crackles with overlapping voices. I have visual. Bomber, 10 o'clock high. Break, break, friendly fighter crossing. Where is control? I can't... There is no control, not in the old sense. Stein steadies his climb and forces himself to breathe. You, watching from his seat, would feel how wrong it is, how the night offers no horizon, only the instrument panel's dim glow and a distant inferno that's both beacon and grave. As he approaches Hamburg's outer fireglow, a shadow slides across the stars, long, slow, heavy. A Lancaster, blocked out, engines droning like a low thunder. For a second, Stein can't believe it's that easy. Then he sees the stream, more silhouettes, spaced like beads on a string, flying straight and level into the heart of the burning city. He pushes the nose down, lining up behind the nearest bomber. Tracer rises from below, arcing into the darkness. Searchlights stab upward, briefly pinning a bomber in a harsh white cone. Then the light flickers, blinded by smoke. Stein squeezes the trigger. His MG 151 cannons hammer. Orange sparks walk along the bomber's wing. The Lancaster lurches, begins to trail a pale ribbing of flame.
But as Stein closes, flak bursts blossom in front of him. German shells, fired blind into a sky now crowded with German fighters. He jerks the stick, barely missing a collision with another Bf 109 that flashes past, its pilot's face white in the cockpit glow. No one has time to apologize. Below, Hamburg burns. Above, the Luftwaffe's defenders hunt by firelight, while British crews scatter another wave of metallic strips into the night, each fluttering piece buying seconds, miles, and lives.
Lieutenant Rolf Stein pulls up hard, the Bf 109 shuddering as he climbs back above the flak belt. His breath comes in short pulls that fog the inside of his oxygen mask. Below, the anti-aircraft batteries keep firing because they have no choice. The gunners can't see the British bombers clearly through the smoke, and now they can't always see the German fighters either. A burst detonates off Stein's left wingtip. The cockpit flashes white. For an instant, he smells cordite and hot oil, then nothing but the harsh bite of oxygen and sweat. Altano fighters, keep above the barrage line, a controller's voice pleads over the radio, more prayer than command. Recognition flares, use recognition flares. Stein spots a pale green flare drifting downward. Another fighter, maybe a Focke-Wulf 190, rolls past it like a moth around a lantern. In the distance, a Lancaster silhouette cuts across the glow of Hamburg's firestorm. Fought fuselage, long wings, steady course. Stein angles toward it again, forcing himself to ignore the fluttering metallic rain still falling in the upper air. It's everywhere. Thin strips, bright when they catch firelight, dull when they tumble into shadow. Some clump together and descend on small parachutes, a sick parody of airborne troops. Stein hears himself whisper inside the mask, half disbelief, half anger. They filled the sky with paper. He closes to within a few hundred meters. The bomber's exhaust flames pulse blue-white in the night,
unmistakable. Stein squeezes the trigger in a disciplined burst. His cannon rounds walk from the outer wing inward. A section of the Lancaster's port wing glows, then spits flame. The British aircraft begins a slow, awful roll. For a heartbeat, Stein feels the primitive triumph Herman promised. Visual hunting, a clean kill without radar lies. Then the bomber's rear gun opens up. Tracers reach toward him like fingers.
Stein breaks away, dives, and the world turns into a spinning mix of firelight, flak bursts, and other fighters crossing his path with no separation, no order. Down below, the city itself becomes a weapon. The firestorm's winds shove smoke into towering columns that twist and collapse, hiding aircraft and revealing them again without warning. Searchlights punch upward, try to hold a bomber, then lose it as the beam is swallowed by soot. You can feel how the battle is being fought in fragments, seconds of visibility, then blindness. Near the Elbe, Hauptmann Werner's Streib is up as well, this time in a U-88 night fighter, his radar operator still cursing the useless Liechtenstein scope. Streib has adapted faster than most. He uses the glow of the city to find the bomber stream, then climbs above it, dropping down onto silhouettes like a hawk. Even for him, it's chaos.
He fires on a Halifax that drifts wide of the markers and watches it fall, trailing sparks, only to have a German fighter slash across his nose, so close he sees the pilot's goggles. Streib jerks his aircraft upright, missing collision by meters. "This is madness," his radar operator says, voice strained. "We are killing and being killed in the same dark." By dawn, Luftwaffe claims are high, too high. Some bombers were certainly shot down, but debriefings reveal the cost. Aircraft lost to flak, to collisions, to disorientation, to pilots chasing the wrong shadow. The wild sow idea works, but it bleeds its own men. July 28, 1943, 10:30 a.m. Rechlin Test Center. Dr. Hans Plendl stands over a Würzburg receiver cabinet while technicians adjust knobs and replace vacuum tubes with practiced speed. They're experimenting with filters, with gain reduction, with anything that might let operators see through the blizzard. A young engineer offers a hopeful observation.
The snow on the scope drifts and spreads differently than a solid bomber return. Plendl doesn't dismiss it, but his eyes are tired. Perhaps, he says, an experienced operator can sometimes recognize a real formation within the noise. But the British have already won what matters. They have taken away certainty. On the British side, the certainty feels like relief. At RAF stations, intelligence officers collect crew reports. Windows successful, fighter activity reduced, radar warning minimal. But one fear remains at every briefing table, spoken quietly, never quite as a joke. If Britain can do this to Germany, Germany can do it back. For the moment, though, the aluminum strips keep falling, quiet, weightless, indifferent, and the Reich's radar screens keep turning into winter storms.
August 2nd, 1943, 9:05 p.m. Stade radar station. Oberleutnant Klaus Hoffmann stares at the Würzburg scope as the sweep comes around again, green, circular, methodical, and then the familiar blizzard begins to build. Not as violent as Hamburg's first night, but unmistakable, shimmering clutter that swallows clean echoes and turns distance into guesswork. He's learned not to panic. Panic wastes seconds, and seconds are lives. "Reduce gain," Hoffmann orders, voice flat with fatigue. The operator's hand moves, and the snow thins a little, just enough to reveal something underneath. A smear, a thickening. Not points, not the crisp pearls of a bomber stream, but a shape. Hoffmann's pencil hovers above the plotting table. He has begun to read the noise, the way sailors read fog, by its edges, by its drift,
by the way it pulses when a real massive aircraft passes behind it. It's not certainty. Nothing is certain anymore, but it's a start.
On the telephone line to a nearby fighter field, the controller sounds older than he did a month ago. Vectoring will be approximate, he warns. We are working through interference. Approximate. In 1942, that word would have been unacceptable. August 3rd, 1943, 1:40 a.m., over the North Sea, inbound to the Ruhr. Flight Lieutenant David Shannon's Lancaster rides turbulence at 6,000 meters. The bomber stream stretched into a long, disciplined river of engines and exhaust. He can't see the aircraft ahead. Blackout paint and distance swallow them, but he feels their presence in the steady rhythm of navigation calls and the occasional glint of moon on a wingtip. "Window, now," Shannon says. The wireless operator hauls another bundle from the stock, paper-wrapped, awkward, stamped with a code, and feeds it through the chute. Behind them, it bursts into a cloud of thin metallic strips that flutter and tumble, a man-made weather system seeded into the night.
In the rear turret, the gunner watches the strips fall and thinks absurdly of confetti. Then he sees a fighter flare in the distance, and the thought dies. "Corkscrew!" he shouts. Shannon throws the Lancaster into the practiced evasive pattern, down, turn, up, turn, while the aircraft groans under stress. You can almost feel the bomber's weight fighting the maneuver, like a train forced onto a tight curve. The window continues to spill out, even as the bomber twists, leaving a ragged, glittering wake. Somewhere in that wake, German radar operators are squinting at their snowstorms and trying to decide what is real. August 17th, 1943, 10:30 p.m., Luftwaffe Night Fighter Airfield, Venlo, Netherlands. Hauptmann Werner Streib stands beneath the wing of his Ju-88, listening to a technician explain the newest modification bolted into the cockpit roof. Upward firing cannons, Schräge Musik. The barrels angle toward the sky, like a secret.
"You approach from below," the technician says, tapping the mount. The bomber's belly is dark. The gunners rarely look down. Streib runs a gloved hand along the cold metal. Radar may be compromised, but geometry isn't. Neither is human habit. In the briefing hut, a staff officer pins up a new directive, Zama Sau, tame boar. Night fighters will be guided loosely toward the bomber stream, using whatever radar clarity remains, then released to hunt inside it, using their own eyes, their own instincts, and now these upward guns. Streib looks around at the younger pilots. They've stopped asking when the radar will work again. They're asking instead where the bomber stream will be, how bright the moon is, whether cloud cover will hide silhouettes, and how heavy the flak will be over the targets. The war has shifted, not away from science, never that, but toward adaptation. Every advantage becomes temporary. Every system becomes a target. Back at Rechlin, Dr.
Hans Plendl listens as engineers propose new frequencies and new sets, longer wavelengths less vulnerable to short window strips, new receiver designs, new training programs for operators to distinguish drift clutter from mass movement. Plendl nods, writes notes, issues orders, but he cannot erase the image that still haunts him, Hamburg burning while his scopes turned white. And in the RAF briefing rooms, Shannon hears the quiet warning spoken between the lines. Keep dropping window, but do not believe it makes you invisible, because in the dark above Germany, the defenders are learning to hunt without eyes, and then slowly to build new eyes. June 6th, 1944, 2:18 a.m., radar station at Cap Grisnez, Pas-de-Calais. Gefreiter Emil Dorner presses his headset tight as the Freya scope blooms with returns over the channel.
The sweep paints them in thick clusters, too thick almost, massive shapes where there should be open water. To Dorner, it looks like the sea itself has risen and turned into steel. Contact, many contacts, he says, voice cracking. Bearing west-northwest, range 35 kilometers in closing. His senior operator leans in, eyes narrowed. The screen is alive with it, blotches, streaks, pulsing patches that seem to drift like weather. And there, mixed into the clutter, are clearer marks that could be escorts, fast boats, or nothing at all. The station commander, Hauptmann Sievers, snatches the field telephone and calls higher headquarters. In the background, wind rattles the hut's shutters. Outside, the channel is black and empty to the naked eye, yet on the scope, it's crowded with an armada.
Sir, Sievers says into the line, forcing calm, we are detecting a large formation, possibly invasion shipping, approaching Pas-de-Calais. He doesn't say the word everyone is afraid to speak, but it hangs in the air anyway. Invasion. Out over the water, RAF aircraft fly steady patterns that aren't attack runs at all, but choreography. Some are dropping metallic strips in timed bursts, window, now refined into routine, while others tow radar-reflecting devices and fly loops designed to imitate the speed and spacing of ships. Operation Glimmer and Operation Taxable, an illusion built from aluminum and discipline, laid carefully across the German warning network like a veil. From Dorno's seat, it looks convincing enough to start a war. In the dark, German coastal artillery batteries begin to stir. Dispatch riders move. Staff officers wake commanders who have slept in uniform for years. Orders are passed with that old, urgent edge of 1940, except now the enemy isn't just on the scope.
He's everywhere the scope says he is, and nowhere it can prove. Dorner watches the returns swell, then smear, then swell again. He tries the tricks he's been taught since Hamburg. Reduce gain, adjust tuning, watch the edges. But the pattern feels deliberate, almost intelligent. The fleet seems to behave like a fleet. He swallows. Herr Hauptmann, Ifkus's window. Sievers cuts him off. Do not guess. Report what you see. And that is the trap. The screen shows what the Allies want the screen to show. June 6th, 1944, 4:35 a.m. The same station. A new report arrives, fragmentary, shouted over a bad line from Normandy. There are parachutes. There is naval gunfire. There are landings west of the Seine. For a moment, Dorner doesn't understand. He looks back to his Freascope, still thick with contacts off Calais, still insisting the invasion is coming here. Sievers goes still, the phone pressed to his ear. Repeat, he says, voice suddenly small.
Outside, the first dull thumps of distant artillery roll in from the south, not the west. The war is not where the scope says it is. In that instant, Dorner realizes what Hoffmann and Plendl understood a year earlier, when Hamburg burned under a snowstorm of false echoes. Radar is only as truthful as the sky allows. And the sky, now, is an Allied weapon. May 3rd, 1945, 9:10 p.m. A battered radar hut outside Flensburg, near the Danish border. Oberleutnant Klaus Hoffmann, older, thinner, uniform faded, stands before a scope that barely works. Power flickers. The sweep is weak, the green line trembling. No bomber streams tonight, no night fighters to vector. Just static, and the distant rumble of a collapsing Reich. A young corporal enters with a message slip, hands shaking. Sir, Berlin has fallen. The radio says... He stops, unable to finish. Hoffmann nods once. He has no speech prepared for the end of his world. He only looks at the scope, at the emptiness, and remembers the first time the snow appeared, how it wasn't weather at all, but proof that the enemy
had learned to reach into Germany's nervous system and squeeze. Outside, the night is quiet. Somewhere far away, metallic strips, once guarded like a secret, now a standard tool of modern war, still lie in fields and rivers, dulling in the rain. Hoffman removes his headset and sets it carefully on the table, as if the gesture might restore order to something that has long since slipped beyond any man's control.